13. We'll begin reading in verse 14. Let me see here, I was one page shy. Now Elisha was fallen sick of his sickness whereof he died, and Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over his face and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And Elisha said unto him, Take bow and arrows. And he took unto him bow and arrows. And he said to the king of Israel, Put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it. And Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands. And he said, Open the window eastward. And he opened it. And Elisha said, Shoot. And he shot. And he said, The arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Syrians in Aphek till thou hast consumed them. And he said, Take the arrows. And he took them, and said to the king of Israel, Smite upon the ground. And he smote thrice and stayed. And the man of God was wroth with him, and said, Thou shouldest have smitten 5 or 6 times. Then hadst thou smitten Syria till thou hast consumed it. Whereas now thou shalt smite Syria but thrice. And Elisha died, and they buried him, and the bands of the Moabites invaded the land at the coming of the year. And it came to pass, as they were burying a man, that behold, they spied a band of men, and they cast the man into the sepulchre of Elisha. And when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up upon his feet. But Hazael, the king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. And the Lord was gracious unto them, and had compassion on them, and respect unto them, because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, neither cast he them from his presence as yet. So Hazael, the king of Syria, died, and Ben-Hadad, his son, reigned in his stead. And Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, took again out of the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken out of the hand of Jehoahaz, his father, by war. 3 times did Joash beat him, and recovered the cities of Israel. You may be seated. A bit of a longer reading this morning as we find ourselves thrust into the really the middle of Israel's history. And this period of time in their nation's history, they found themselves in a very interesting period of politics, geopolitical happenings, as it were. If you would imagine for a second a map of Israel, even modern day Israel, you have Israel laying between the sea to the west, and then to the east of them, down at the bottom, there was Edom. A little bit above Edom was Moab. Above Moab was Ammon, and then above Ammon was the nation of Syria, which then got conquered by Assyria. And these nations had all, well, aside from maybe Ammon, had all begun with terms of peace with Israel. 2 Kings chapter 1 opens up with, And the nation of Moab rebelled against Israel. Edom also would rebel against Israel. Ammon was a constant problem for Israel. And these nations were inhabiting territory which was originally delegated to the tribes of Reuben, down a little bit south on the east side of Jordan, to Gad, to the east side of Jordan, and then to the eastern province, which had been allotted to Manasseh. Manasseh had been split into 2 different territories, one being east of the Jordan River, up at the northeastern side of Israel, and the other one being north, but more centrally located as far as the nations were, or the tribes had received their inheritance there in the land. Where was I? With these different nations being on Israel's borders, they would come in every year typically, and they would conquer cities. They would conquer portions of the land of Israel. One of God's judgments upon Israel to try and get them to turn back to him was that they would lose portions of the inherited land. They would lose portions of their inheritance. And so we pick up here as the prophet Elisha is dying, and the king of Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel, that northern half of the nation, the king comes to see Elisha on his deathbed, and he is given this prophecy. The title of the message this morning is 3 Arrows Cast. And we will look at that a little bit later. We'll look at Jehoahaz's actions here, Joash's actions here. We'll look at those a little bit later. But for a minute, I want to just establish the relationship between the prophet and the kings. Because I think for us to understand this passage, it's important that we understand the position that the prophet had in Israel. We find that Elijah was prophet for about 30 years. He was prophet primarily for Ahaz. He just kind of shows up one day on the scene. 1 Kings chapter 17. He shows up and he begins performing great works in Israel. He begins really reminding Ahaz, who was a very idolatrous king, who was a very wicked king. His wife was Jezebel. We still remember that name in modern culture today. People, if they're naming something Jezebel, it's usually in blatant rebellion to cultural norms, right? We associate that name with wickedness. This was the wife of King Ahaz, who made himself and his nation subservient to Baal. And so it is that we pick up in 1 Kings 17, God dealing directly with Baal, God dealing directly with the prophets of Baal, the priests of Baal, there in 1 Kings chapter 18. I draw your remembrance to that great scene where Elijah stood up against the 400 prophets of Baal, and they had 2 altars, and the task was simple. Pray to your God, have him light the altar on fire. Right? If your God is real, if your God listens, then most certainly he'd be able to light the fire of the altar and consume the sacrifice. Prophets of Baal, from the morning into the time of the evening sacrifice, they tried and tried and tried. They cried and cried and cried. It didn't happen. Elijah prayed once after the altar was soaked with water. God showed his power on that day, and he reminded Israel that he was the one true God, the one and only God in Israel, the one and only God in the whole rest of the world. We find his successor is Elisha, and Elisha was named in 2 Kings chapter 2. God had appointed Elisha to be Elijah's successor. And Elisha was a prophet in the land for about 40 years. He stood as prophet to 4 kings over 2 dynasties. At this portion in Israel's history, when Elisha took the office of prophet, they were under the legacy of a man named Omri. He was a general who usurped the throne from his king. He had a couple of descendants that ruled as kings. The man that was king when Elisha came into power was, I believe, Omri's grandson. He was a wicked man, very wicked man. God said, because of your wickedness, your line, your lineage isn't going to last anymore. And so God appointed Jehu to come in and really clean up the throne. Ahab was Omri's son. It was under Ahab that God made the promise to Israel, hey, this line of kings, this line of rulers, I'm going to do away with them. Jehu was appointed He cleaned house, if you will, slew all the line of Ahab. There's some interesting nuances there with some things that happened in Judah at the same time. The king of Judah being a relative of Ahab. Different things that we don't have time for today. Jehu did the bidding of the Lord, but he didn't submit himself to the Lord. He didn't submit himself to the will of God, to be a servant of God. His son and his grandson both also reigned, and I believe he reigned for his line reigned for 5 generations before another lineage came in and usurped the throne from even them. And you may be wondering at this point in time, well, Noah, why is this relevant? Here's why. During all this time, during the time of Jehu's predecessor, during the time of Jehu's son, Joash, who was Jehu's grandson, during this entire period of time, Elisha was prophet in Israel. Elisha had direct interactions with the king. He had direct interactions with the nation of Israel as God's voice in that nation, as his spokesman, if you will. Direct interactions. The things that Elisha spoke happened. When Elisha would come to the king and he would say, God has said you won't see water for this period of time, there was a drought. When he said this nation will come in and invade you, they came in, they invaded. When, I believe it's chapter 3, 2 Kings chapter 3, in fact, let's just turn there. 2 Kings chapter 3, we'll start in verse 6. And King Jehoram went out of Samaria at the same time and numbered all Israel. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art. My people as thy people. My horses as thy horses. And he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. So what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to drop down through the bottom of Judah, go into Edom, and then come up against Moab from the northern border of Edom. Because they had the Dead Sea and then, of course, the River Jordan standing as a barrier in the way between Israel and Judah and the nation of Moab. So it was more convenient for them, better for them, for military purposes, drop down through Edom, go over it, and go up. The king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, and they fetched a compass, a 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, alas, the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said unto the king of Israel, what have I to do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father and to the prophets of thy mother. And the king of Israel said unto him, no, for the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, as the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, surely were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look toward thee, nor see thee. And we'll stop there. Elisha that day pronounced victory to this coalition of kings, the king of Israel, of Judah, and Edom, as they were going up against Moab, who was a threat really to all of them. just to illustrate that he was the voice of God. They looked to him even beyond the prophets, the priests of these other gods, of these other nations. They knew that when they needed an answer, when they needed something done, that they could turn to God, they could turn to Yahweh, and it would happen. They would see it done. The calling of a prophet was not a glamorous calling. Usually you go to the prophet because there's a problem, right? And we see that illustrated here in what we just read in 2 Kings chapter 3. And I'm sure you can think of other examples, times when a king or an individual would go to a prophet of God because there was an issue and they needed a solution. And there are no other answers to it. Alternatively, when the prophet came to you, there was also a problem, right? You didn't want to visit from a prophet most of the time because it meant that God had something to say to you, and it was usually, you're really doing something wrong here, get it fixed or get out. Over in 1 Kings 17, aforementioned scripture, verse 1 reads, And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. When the prophet came to Ahab, it was not pronouncing good news. Every once in a while, they would have something good to say, but more often than not, it was something that would make the king very angry. The position that the prophet was put in, not a fun position. You can think of prophets like Jeremiah, who suffered really throughout his entire tenure as a prophet. Right? He had a very hard life being the voice of God. We read over in Hebrews the accounting of the prophets, that many of them died because of the office that they held. Jesus proclaimed there as he was overlooking Jerusalem before he came in for what they call the triumphal entry. So, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou who, what? Kills the prophets, who stones the prophets. Lost my train of thought. That's always fun. Going back to our opening reading here, though, we find that this king of Israel, in spite of his wickedness, and he was reckoned as a wicked king, he was reckoned as an idolater, he was reckoned as an evil man. When he came to Elisha, when he came to the prophet of God, his declaration was, Charity Israel and the horsemen thereof. The strength of Israel, the force by which Israel has any power. And we find that this is not the first time that this phrase was used. Over in chapter 2, 2 Kings chapter 2, we're already in 2 Kings chapter 3. We'll just turn a page back to chapter 2, verse 9. And it came to pass when they were gone over, Elijah said to Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, Thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and cried, My father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes, and rent them into pieces. direct quote, a direct declaration that we find Elisha declaring as Elijah was taken up into heaven, as this chariot of fire came down from God and took Elijah up to heaven. And we today, I don't think that impresses us nearly as much as it should, because we find in the scriptures that before Christ came, people didn't just get to go to heaven, right? We find the blood of Christ is what allows us entry in before God. It doesn't matter how righteous we are here on earth, without the blood of Christ, there is nothing that can bridge that gap. There is nothing that can give us entrance in before God. And yet we find here Elijah was a type of Christ himself, but Elijah was given this entrance in. I'll let you ponder that on your own. But we find that this declaration, the same declaration, was given by Joash as Elisha himself was perishing. I think that not only was he declaring that he was an asset to Israel during his time as prophet, but he was also truly a prophet of God. He was truly given that double portion of Elijah's spirit, because we see the same statement being used for both of these men. All of that to say that as Joash was commanded, take a bow, take these arrows, he wasn't going in cold. He knew that the thing that he was being told to do was going to be prophetic. He knew that the man telling him to do these things was a prophet. You know, the test of a prophet that God had given Israel, one of the tests of a prophet, was that if he says anything that is untrue, disregard him as a prophet. If he makes a prophecy and it doesn't come to pass, you don't have to listen to him. I didn't send him. He's not empowered by me. All the prophecies that Elisha had made, as he had been sent to Israel, all the prophecies that Elisha had made had come true. He was a prophet of God. And Joash knew this. Turn back over to 2 Kings chapter 13 here for a minute. I really want to drive this point home, this thought home. Joash was not doing this ignorant. And it might seem like a nonsensical thing to us for a prophet to tell a king, take a bow, take some arrows, shoot them out the window. Right? But he declares, where is it here? Chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 17. And he said, open the window eastward. And he opened. And Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria, for thou shalt smite the Assyrians in Aphek, till thou hast consumed them. So he was even aware, made aware as he was doing this thing, doing what was asked of him, that this was an action which would have direct consequences for the nation as a whole. It was an action which, if done in faith, would lead to very tangible benefits for the nation of Israel. Syria had come in and taken a lot of land from Israel. More than Ammon, more than Edom, more than Moab. Syria was a very powerful rival to those northern 10 tribes of Israel. They had conquered a lot of Israel's land. A lot of cities had fallen to the Syrian horde before Assyria came in and conquered Syria. So he knew, verse 18, as he took the arrows and he smote the ground 3 times. He was doing this knowing that it was direct prophecy from God of victory over the Syrians. And yet he only did it 3 times. So it's no surprise in verse 19 why Elisha was so angry with him. Right? I've just told you, you do this action, you do this thing, you're going to have victory over Syria. I've just told you. You had the power in your hands. You had the opportunity. You could have completely conquered all of Syria. You could have. It was there. Smite the ground a couple more times and they would have been completely defeated. And as we find through the end of the chapter, that God was gracious. God was good to Israel, and that in these 3 victories they were given the ability to retake what had been conquered by Syria. But he didn't go all the way, did he? He didn't take it to the best ending, right? 3 times. He doubted. And for us today, reading this, hindsight being what it is, we think of what Joash did there. We think, well, that was silly. Why didn't you just beat the ground like there was a spider there, right? And just start whacking it as many times as you possibly can. But if we take a moment to step away from this account, knowing everything that we know, let's put ourselves in the shoes of this man. Let's put ourselves there. Because we can. Now, we've never had anyone come up to us and tell us, whack the ground here and you're going to get victory over your enemies, right? Wouldn't that be simple? I mean, if we had any enemies, just tap the ground with an arrow and all of a sudden, well, we're given the power. Oh, but you know, we do have an enemy, don't we? We have someone who stands at the throne of God and accuses us day and night. Do we have the ability to conquer it? We see in verses 15 through 20 here that there's a promise. There is the promise that has been given. But then there is action to be taken on the promise. Right? Not everything that God says, that God promises us, are things that we can just sit back and receive. In fact, very few things that God promises His people are things that we can just sit back and receive. Let's turn over to Exodus chapter 23. Scripture I reference often, should be familiar to us all. Exodus chapter 23, verse 20. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions. For my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice, and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to thine enemies, and an adversary to thine adversaries. For my angel shall go before thee, and bring thee unto the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. Thou shalt utterly overthrow them, and quite break down their images. And ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water. And I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. There shalt nothing cast their young, nor be barren in thy land. The number of thy days I will fulfill. I will send my fear before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. And I will make all thine enemies turn their backs to thee. And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before thee. I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against thee. By little and little I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be increased, and inherit the land. Israel had this promise from God that as they required more land, that as they required the expansion of their nation, because the blessings of God were just so abundant that their borders couldn't contain them anymore, that he would go out just the same as he did as they crossed over the river Jordan the first time coming into the promised land under Joshua, that as he drove out the peoples and the nations from before them, that he would do the same. That all they would need to do is turn to God, ask him for this deliverance, ask him for these victories, and he would. And he would. They still had to take action, didn't they? And what do we find that Israel did right away? Rather than rely on God, rather than rely on his promise and take action in faith, believing on his promises, what did they do? They turned to the gods, the lands around them. They turned to the nations around them as allies. Right? We saw that there in passages that we read in Kings, in chapter 3, 2 Kings chapter 3, that the king of Israel came to the king of Judah, said, "Hey, Moab is a problem. I can't deal with them on my own. Help me." And they turned together to the king of Edom and said, "Well, maybe all three of us can go against Moab." And then they realized that it's not so simple, that they didn't have the power, even all three of them allied together. They didn't have the power to go in against Moab and win. Don't we find that in our own lives? That the times when we think, yeah, I've got this, I can do this. I'm doing great. I'm reading my Bible every day, I'm praying all the time, I feel just so close to God. And we see the blessings of God in that, and then what do? We start getting a little colder. So yeah, I'm still riding this high. I'm still super close to God. I don't need to read today. I don't need to pray. I don't need to pray about this thing in my life. Bring it before God. Ask him for help. I can take care of it. I'll just work an extra shift. Or I'll just take a couple extra Tylenol. I don't need God's help for this issue. How many times in our lives have we been taken to the edge of our ability? We found ourselves wanting. We've had nowhere else to turn but to God. Well, God, all right, I was wrong. I can't do it. I've worked all the overtime I can, and that check still isn't big enough. I've taken an entire bottle of aspirin, and this pain isn't going away. Help me, Lord. Help me out here. How many times has God proven himself faithful to his promise? That in our time of need, when we cry out to him, he is there. He helps us. And in personal experience, it's never in the way you expect, is it? You pray to Him. You expect a certain answer. You expect Him to work something in your life in the way that you think it'll happen or that it should happen. Lo and behold, He answers your prayer, and it's in some way that you didn't even think of, you didn't even consider. He takes the hurt that you're feeling, and instead of just taking that hurt away, He shows you how you can help other people by it. And you're blessed in that. He doesn't immediately take away the temptations that you're struggling with, or the physical pain that you're bearing. But instead, He shows you how to overcome in spite of those things. You know, there are people who are here today who are coming in spite of physical pain, physical torment, health problems. I appreciate that. I do. I really do. Even more than that, God appreciates that. Yeah? I've already mentioned broken hearts, temptations. You know, over in 1 Corinthians 10, you don't have to read there. The reference in my notes is verse 1 through 14. If you wanted that, I'll just read one verse here. It says, there hath no temptation taken you, but as such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. As Paul was writing these things, it was to a church that was in trouble. The idolatry that they had around them, the things that they had coming into the congregation, some serious issues there, that church in Corinth. And Paul reminds them that it doesn't matter how strong the temptation feels. Doesn't matter how bad things look around you. Number one, all these temptations are normal. And number two, God isn't going to give you more than what you can handle. And even when you're in the middle of it, dealing with it, even when it seems like there's no hope, like you're going to be overwhelmed, God has given you a way to escape it, that you can bear it, and He has not given you more than what you can bear. And that doesn't just sound true for temptation, does it? That's for broken hearts. That's for health issues, health problems, as severe as they can be. That's for everything. We can have faith, we can have trust that when we feel like the world is caving in around us, closing in around us, that we have a way to escape. That we can bear it. What does Jesus say there at the end of Matthew chapter 11? Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you should find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We can bear these burdens because we're not bearing them alone. We can feel these hurts and we can know that God is right there with us. He understands. What does the shortest verse in the Bible say? Jesus wept. There's nothing that we experience here in this life that God did not take upon Himself. When He came as a man, He felt our burdens. He was tempted, but He sinned not. So why don't we go to Him? Why don't we go to Him more? Why do we only cast a couple arrows. When we know that we can go to God with all of our problems, with all of our issues, with all of our hurts, that we can take them to Him and we can ask Him for help. We can ask Him for endurance. We can ask Him for understanding and be content in knowing that there are some things that we're just not going to understand this side of heaven. Why don't we? I bet if Elisha was there with us, he'd be pretty angry too, wouldn't he? Look at what you have. Look at the promises that you have been given. Look at how much wasted potential there is because you just won't believe. James chapter 1, verse 12 through 15 say, "Blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it's finished, brings forth death." John 16:33 says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." We often look at the commandments of God through the lens of this temporary life, and we wonder, well, why does God require these things of me? Why does He demand that I flee from sin? Our flesh likes sin, doesn't it? But you know, those things that our flesh enjoys the most are the very things that kill us. We don't have time to dwell on that thought more than that. I've already mentioned that we have Christ. We can go to Him. We can ask Him. Mark 11, verse 22 says, "And Jesus answering said unto him, Have faith in God, for verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say to this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire when you pray, believe that you might receive them, and ye shall have them. And when you stand praying, forgive, if ye have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven might forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses." John 16, a little further on from what we just, a little bit back from what we had just read, verse 25, "These things have I spoken unto you in Proverbs, but the time comes when I shall no more speak to you in Proverbs, but I will show you plainly of the Father. In that day ye shall ask in my name, and I say not unto you that I will pray the Father for you, for the Father Himself loves you, because you have loved me, and believe that I came out from God." And I want to just dwell on that thought for just a moment. You know, when Jesus was here on this earth, He had His followers, His apostles. They could come to Him, they could ask for anything that they needed, and He would give them to them. He would pray to the Father for them. But here He is saying, that's not going to be the system anymore. You don't have to ask me and have me pray for you. The Father Himself loves you because you love me. Now the things that you ask, because I'm gone back to the Father, the things that you ask, the Father is going to give them to you. If you pray believing, if You pray in faith. It should be also added on there, if you pray according to God's will. We're not talking about praying to become a millionaire just for the sake of becoming a millionaire. In fact, I think you find in life that when there's more blessing, there's more burden to share the blessing. We as stewards of everything that God has given us ought to be mindful of that. We have these assurances in prayer. And lastly, we have this assurance in life. As we prepare to close, let's turn over to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, verse 22, it says, "And he said to his disciples, Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, neither for the body what you shall put on. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn, and God feedeth them. How much more are ye better than the fowls? And which of you, with taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? If you then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind, for all these things do the nations of the world seek after. And your Father knoweth that you have need of these things. Rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." And we'll stop there. You see the assurance that we have from God that our concern is not the things of this world. God has seen fit to give us everything that we need that we might serve Him. And if we have very little, then He's seen it fit that we don't need much to serve Him. Or if we have abundance, then I guess He's seen fit that we can serve Him having abundance. But if one day our storehouses of grain all burn down and we find ourselves destitute, well, that doesn't mean that we stop serving the Lord, does it? That's the same with our heart, isn't it? On days when seasons in our life when we find our hearts just full to the bursting. Joy unspeakable, as the song says. You know, we bless the Lord when our hearts are full. It's a lot harder to bless the Lord when we find our hearts emptied. And it can happen, can't it? And it can happen very quickly, in unexpected ways, and it'll shatter us for a little while. But what right have we to answer anything more than Job? To dust I came, to dust I'll go. He's given us everything that we have. He's given us everything that we need. Paul, as he was recounting his life, I believe it's in Philippians, it might be in Timothy. What did he say? That he's learned how to serve the Lord in plenty. He's learned how to serve the Lord without much. But most importantly, he's learned that he can do all things through Christ who strengthens him. And brothers and sisters, we have that strength, don't we? We have Christ. So why? Here's the question for us to carry throughout our week, maybe beyond. Why, when we've been given the promise of victory, when we have been given the promise of having everything that we need, having all this power at our fingertips to serve the Lord, to live good lives, why do we only ever strike the ground 3 times? We could do it so much more. That's all I have for you this morning. I thank you for your time, for your attention. Let's stand.